When my younger brother came back after studying abroad for 4 years, I thought maybe he wouldn't recognize me. That I was no longer the sister who used to draw all night, who sang loudly in the kitchen, that behind a thin layer of makeup and a long-sleeved dress, in the middle of summer, no one could see. But when I poured the wine and my sleeve slipped slightly, just enough to reveal my wrist, and Nathan's eyes paused, I knew he saw it. He said nothing, just silence, picked up a piece of salmon and changed the subject. And my husband squeezed my knee under the table, gently, but just enough to silence me. But that night, the door opened again. Nathan came back, alone, and he whispered a name to me, a name that changed everything. Have you ever stayed silent while someone you love slowly disappeared behind a fake smile? If this story makes your heart skip a beat, hit like and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you, you won't be able to look away. My name is Isabella Hartley. I'm 31 years old. I used to illustrate children's books. I once lived in a small apartment by the sea with breezy windows and a sun-drenched easel. Now I live in a luxurious house in the suburbs with my husband, Dr. Adrian Monroe, a man everyone admires. From the outside, I'm living the American dream so many people wish for. A big house, a beautiful yard, a fancy car, a successful husband. But if you've ever seen a wild bird locked in a golden cage, you'll understand how I feel. At first, Adrian was perfect, gentle, a good listener, always supportive of my art. We met after my mother's funeral. When the world turned cold and uncertain, Adrian was the place I clung to. He helped me pack up my old apartment, brought my easel and paints into his house, where everything was spotless, organized, and frighteningly quiet. After we got married, I thought small disagreements were normal in a marriage. He told me to take a break from work to focus on our home. He said I deserved to rest, to be spoiled. I believed him. And slowly, everything began to shift. Adrian didn't like me talking on the phone too long. He started managing my contact list, then criticized each person until I started thinking they were annoying, unnecessary. I once had a close group of friends, people I used to meet up with for outdoor sketching every weekend. Now, they're just names in my contact list I'm too scared to call. "You're just too sensitive," Adrian once said when I brought up how controlling he was. "I just want you to be safe." For a while, I believe I might really be weak, and maybe he did all this out of love. But love doesn't make you flinch every time you hear footsteps down the hall. Love doesn't make you startle at night when a cup falls in the kitchen, expecting someone to yell. Love doesn't make you erase every drawing you create because it makes him uncomfortable. After 5 years, I stopped drawing. My hands were now only used to make tea, fold clothes, or gently touch the bruises on my arms I tried to hide with long sleeves, even in July. I used to think that if I did everything perfectly, 3-course dinners, spotless house, gentle voice, Adrian wouldn't get angry anymore. But his rage didn't come because I made a mistake, it came because he wanted it to. He once scolded me for forgetting to lock the living room window. That night, he dragged me into the bedroom, his voice low and threatening. "You want people to see you, don't you? Want someone to see what you wear around this house?" I didn't answer. I didn't dare. My body slowly became something I no longer recognized. Not just because of the purple bruises on my arms or back, but because it moved on his schedule, smiled when he wanted, stayed silent when he frowned. There was one time I tried reaching out to an old friend, Eliza, the only one who still sent me Christmas cards every year. Adrian found out. He didn't yell. He simply canceled my bank card, erased the therapy appointment I had booked, and said, "I think you need to learn to be more grateful." That night, I sat in the bathroom with the door locked, clutching my mother's old hairbrush. I didn't do anything reckless. I just sat there for 2 hours and cried without making a sound. I used to think I'd die that way, not from a single blow, but from being slowly worn down day by day. Every layer of skin, every spark in my eyes, every smile, every tiny dream fading away. And then Nathan came back. The last time I saw him was at his college graduation in international relations. He was the only one who cried at my wedding, not out of joy, but because of something he couldn't put into words. 4 years, no contact, no letters, no messages. I thought he had forgotten me, but that night, when Nathan's eyes stopped on my wrist, I knew. He still remembered who I was. He was still looking for me in the stranger sitting across from him. When he stood up to say goodbye, he held my hand tightly and whispered, "Here's someone I want you to meet, someone who can help you see yourself again." I didn't have time to ask who, he was gone, and Adrian cracked open a beer and laughed with satisfaction. See, tonight was perfect, no one suspected a thing. But I did suspect. Not Adrian. Myself. Did I have the strength to keep going? Was the dream of a different life real, or just a lullaby to help me survive the night? When the gate clicked shut after dinner, I sat frozen on the back porch, watching the garden lights sway in the wind. Adrian had gone upstairs and I still couldn't move. The pressure on my knee from earlier still lingered, like a silent reminder that I belonged here, in silence. But the door behind me opened again. I turned around, startled, expecting Adrian coming back for water. But it was Nathan. He had put his light jacket back on, holding a small brown paper package. He didn't say a word, just walked straight to the kitchen. I followed him, my feet barely touching the floor, my heart pounding. He placed the package on the table. Do you remember Celeste Vaughn? The name made me freeze. It had been nearly 10 years since I'd heard it. Celeste had been my best friend in high school, the one who used to sketch for the school magazine. After graduation, she took a path no one expected, studied social work, then disappeared from social media, from every old connection. Nathan nodded, as if reading my thoughts. She runs a women's support center now, not one of those places with pamphlets, but a real place where people rebuild from the ground up. They have housing, legal help, and, more importantly, they don't ask questions. I looked at the package. Inside was a phone. No SIM card, no account, just 2 saved numbers. One was Celeste, one was Nathan. I'm not pressuring you, but if something happens, just press and hold the power button for 5 seconds. I'll know anytime. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was scared that saying anything would shatter everything. Nathan gently squeezed my hand, then left, without another word. That night, I didn't sleep. Adrian lay with his back to me, breathing evenly, his arm draped heavily over my waist like a silent claim. I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning between fear and hope, 2 things that hadn't coexisted in my head for many years. The next day, I hid the phone inside the secret compartment of my old easel, the one Adrian thought I had thrown out. I didn't touch it all day. I just sat in the studio, pretending to clean. But really, I was sorting through memories. That afternoon, I walked to the small grocery store 3 blocks from our house. Adrian always encouraged me to get some fresh air, but only if I told him in advance and kept it under an hour. I took the chance to call Celeste while standing behind an old newspaper stand. Her voice was low, unhurried, without pity. Do you still remember how you used to draw the fox, its eyes always looking toward the light? I didn't expect her to remember. I bit my lip, my hand gripping the strap of my bag tightly. Celeste didn't ask anything else. She just told me that if I wanted to meet, I could come to the city library. 3rd floor, far left corner, antique reading table. She'd be waiting for me on Friday, exactly at 10 a.m. When I got home, Adrian was already standing at the door. His face was expressionless, but I knew he'd checked the doorbell camera. He asked how long I'd been gone, what I'd bought, and if I'd seen anyone. I answered each question softly, eyes lowered, holding out the grocery bags for him to check if he wanted. He didn't, just nodded. You should go for walks more often. You look pale. I smiled, an automatic reflex. In my mind, one thought repeated over and over. Friday, 10 a.m. That night, I opened the cabinet again and pulled out an old, yellowed sketch pad. I began sketching what used to be me. A girl leaning sideways, hair loose, eyes shut as if too afraid to look at life. But behind her was another hand reaching out. Not touching, but close enough to make her pause. I didn't know whose hand that was. Maybe it was my future self. Maybe it was Nathan's. Or maybe it belonged to someone I had never met, but who was willing to stand in the shadows so I wouldn't fall. On Friday morning, I put on a long coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and stepped out as I always did. Adrian suspected nothing. I carried an old book with me. Inside it, a slip of paper with the library's address written on it. And I arrived on time. Celeste was already at the table. She hadn't changed much. Still that calm, observant gaze like back in the day. She didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She just tilted her head and smiled, as if we'd never lost touch. I sat down, palms soaked in sweat. I don't know where to start. You don't have to. Just say whatever you're carrying today. I said nothing for 3 full minutes. Then suddenly, like a door bursting open from the inside, I began to speak. I told her about the first time Adrian asked me to stop working, about the painting he tore apart, about my favorite dress he threw into the fireplace because it was too revealing, about the night I stayed up just to stop myself from texting Eliza, afraid Adrian would see. Celeste didn't interrupt. She just listened. I felt my chest grow lighter, little by little, but also heavier, because I knew that speaking wasn't enough. When I finished, Celeste took out a small card. This is the address of a safe house. If you ever need to leave at any time, no warning, we'll come get you. I looked at the card, then tucked it into my book. I'm not sure I can go. You don't have to be sure. I just need you to know, not everyone turns away when they see a bruise. I left the library near noon. The sun outside was soft. I walked slowly toward the bus stop, not to catch a ride, just to stand there, like someone waiting for herself to come back. I didn't know if that day would ever come, but at least I had a map in hand, and I knew I was no longer the only one who could see the road toward the light. I returned home just as the clock struck 12:30 p.m. Adrian was sitting in his office, typing on his laptop, his face focused like the outside world didn't exist. I walked past quietly, without a sound, like a shadow that had been trained well. That afternoon I made a simple lunch: chicken soup, toasted bread, a few thin slices of apple. Adrian didn't look at me while he ate. He only asked, "Which store did you go to?" I answered briefly, without stumbling. He nodded, said nothing more. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but it was that very normalcy that made it hard to breathe. That evening, while Adrian was showering, I unlocked the old art drawer and pulled out the phone Nathan had given me. I deleted the call log from the day before with Celeste, then opened the camera and started taking pictures. I photographed a white shirt with a small blood stain near the cuff, the pair of shoes he once threw at my head in a fit of rage, the blood-stained handkerchief I'd hidden in the pocket of an old coat. Small pieces of evidence, seemingly meaningless, but to me, each image was a piece of memory that hadn't been allowed to speak. I opened my old sketch journal and started marking special days in pencil. Days when he gripped my wrists hard enough to draw blood. Nights I couldn't sleep out of fear he'd turn in bed. Times I shoved earbuds in and played fake rain sounds just to block out the growl from downstairs. But beyond the bruises were the empty spaces I couldn't fill. I remembered walking into the bathroom one morning and not recognizing the face in the mirror. That face had no expression, just 2 eyes staring through. My hair was a mess, skin pale, and the old nightgown hung from me like remnants of someone who once dreamed. I remembered standing in the kitchen in the middle of the night, holding a fruit knife, not to do anything with it, just to remind myself I could still feel it in my hand. I remembered the times I stood by the window, looking out at the quiet brick road, imagining someone would pull up, ring the bell, and say, "You can come with me, right now." But I never went, because I didn't know where I'd go. But now I had a place, a name, a number, someone willing to listen. That night, once Adrian fell asleep, I quietly opened the phone and typed into the Notes app, September 14th, start counting. The next morning, I took out the card Celeste had given me from inside the book and looked carefully at the address. It wasn't far. If needed, I could walk, but getting there would take more than legs. It would take a reason. It would take courage. That afternoon, while cleaning the living room, I accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, knocked our wedding photo frame off a high shelf. The glass shattered across the carpet like blood. I dropped to my knees, gathering each piece, and when I looked at the photo, me smiling in the arms of the man who once swore to protect me, I felt like I was looking at two strangers. I once loved Adrian. Maybe somewhere in the early years that love was real. But love doesn't grow in fear. It can't survive in a house where silence weighs heavier than any insult. That night, when the rain came down, I took a chair out onto the porch. I sat there for almost 2 hours, my shoulders wet, my hair a mess. Adrian didn't come out to ask. He didn't care. Maybe he thought I needed air. Maybe he thought I was learning obedience. The truth is, I was learning how to sit with myself. I remembered what Celeste said. No one can pull you out if you haven't taken the first step. I wasn't sure I'd taken that step, but I had leaned toward the door, and maybe that was enough for today. In the darkness, as I walked back into the house, I noticed a small detail I hadn't before. A tiny tear in the bedroom curtain, something Adrian would be furious about if he saw. My breath caught, my heart slammed against my chest. I didn't know when it tore or if I had done it myself, but one question hit me instantly. If he sees it tomorrow, what will I say? I lay down on the bed, pulled the blanket up to my chest, eyes wide open in the dark. There are fears that make no sound. They don't scream. They don't cry out. They just lie there quietly, like a shadow slipping under the covers beside you. When Adrian turned over and draped his arm across me, I froze. He mumbled something in his sleep, his voice as gentle as it used to be, but I couldn't make it out. I only knew one thing. If I didn't walk away, there would be no tomorrow left to count. I thought of Nathan, of the look in his eyes at dinner. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. Maybe, sometimes, just having one person truly see you is enough to remind you of who you used to be. And if a single glance can crack open a wall in your prison, then maybe I try to touch that crack, just once, because I had started counting, and I didn't want to count in vain anymore. On Monday morning, right after I finished washing the dishes, Adrian walked into the kitchen, his face calm, as if the dark days had never existed. He placed his phone on the table, his voice light as breath. I booked the cabin, 3 days over the weekend. No interruptions, no phones, no schedule. I looked up, a forced smile forming on my lips, only to shatter into cold dread. A cabin, remote, isolated, no phones, no way out. I tried to keep my voice steady. Where is it? Northern Vermont, near a lake. It's got a fireplace, wood floors, windows that look out to pine trees. You'll love it. I nodded, gripping the damp dish towel in my hand. Do I need to pack anything? Just some comfy clothes. We won't be going anywhere. That last sentence made my chest tighten. We won't be going anywhere. That meant no one would see. No one would hear. It meant I could disappear and no one would know. That afternoon, I sat in my old studio, once my art space, now just a storage room. I pulled out my sketchbook, flipped to the page where I marked each time Adrian used sweet words to control me. Words that sounded soft but peeled away every last shred of my freedom. The page was filled with faint gray circles, like closed hooks in a cabinet with no handle. I opened my phone and sent one short message to Celeste. Cabin, weekend. 4 hours later, she replied, "Don't panic. We'll find a way. Don't change routine." I deleted the message immediately, then went on to cook dinner like always. Still the salmon with lemon sauce and roasted potatoes. Still setting the silverware in the exact order Adrian liked. Still lighting candles, playing soft jazz, placing the napkin to the left. I knew this performance so well I'd forgotten what my face looked like when I wasn't acting. During dinner, Adrian looked at me longer than usual. "You seem more at ease than before. Maybe I slept well?" He nodded, smiled. I smiled back. Inside, I was counting. Tuesday. Wednesday. Only 2 days left. That night, while Adrian went out to buy wine, I called Nathan using the secret phone. I spoke quickly, quietly. Just 12 words. Cabin, weekend, Vermont, no signal. I'm scared. He didn't ask anything else, just replied, "I'll be there." I hung up, my body trembling, not from fear, but from the time I truly believed I wasn't alone. On Thursday, I started packing. I folded 2 sets of sleepwear, 3 sets of loose clothes, 1 book, a toothbrush, and a small paintbrush. I didn't plan to paint, I just needed to bring it, as the last thread tying me to who I really was. I also packed another bag, smaller, hidden under old clothes in the laundry room closet, passport, documents, the photo evidence, the sketchbook, and the second phone. On Friday morning, Adrian got up early to prep the luggage. I made coffee and handed him breakfast, calm as ever. "We'll leave the city around 3 p.m., he said. "The roads will be clear and the weather's good." I nodded, refilling his coffee cup, my mind ticking like a countdown clock. Around noon, I got a message from Celeste. The plan is being set. They had located the cabin. Nathan would go with another man named Logan, a former journalist who had once been one of Adrian's victims. He'd help with media if needed. In the worst-case scenario, I knew this was no longer just an escape. This was survival, and if I didn't act now, I might become the next name people hear in a 20-second news story. That afternoon, just before we got in the car, Adrian came over, car keys in hand and an unusually warm look in his eyes. "Thanks for not saying no. I know things have been tense lately. I just want us to reconnect." I tightened my grip on my bag strap. "I want that too." He leaned down to kiss my forehead, the scent of his cologne brushing past me like a blurred memory. I stepped into the car, slid into the passenger seat, my smile fixed in place like I was excited for a weekend getaway. But I wasn't going on vacation. I was running. I was trying to stay alive. As the car turned onto the highway, I looked in the rearview mirror. The familiar street blurred behind us. Houses faded away, and even I felt like I was peeling off my old self, mile by mile. Adrian had no idea. I was counting every road sign, every turn, every landmark I could later describe if someone needed to find me. When he reached to turn up the music, I closed my eyes. Not to relax, but to remember clearly who I was, how far I'd come, and how much further I had to go to live as a human being. We arrived at the cabin just after 5 p.m. The last light of day filtered through thick pine trees, reflecting off the lake like a trembling mirror between dream and reality. Adrian got out first, opened the car door for me like we were newlyweds on a romantic weekend. I stepped out, gripping my bag tightly, eyes locked on the single-story wooden house nestled deep in the forest. No neighbors, no phone signal, no one to hear me scream. "Prettier than the pictures, right?" Adrian smiled, handing me the keys. "You go in first. I'll bring the bags." I nodded, stepped onto the wooden porch, and pushed the door open. The house was dead silent. No cars, no people, just the sound of wind slipping through the cracks and my heart pounding in my chest. I walked through the cabin, a small living room with armchairs, a stone fireplace, an open kitchen, and one bedroom at the end of the hall. No back exit, just one front door. I memorized it. Adrian brought the luggage in, placed the suitcase on the bed, then wrapped his arms around me from behind. "We'll be here for 3 nights, just you and me, no work, no distractions." I smiled, trying to keep my breathing steady. 3 nights. I just needed to survive 3 nights. That evening, he grilled outside on the porch. I made the salad. He played music from a portable speaker, a classic jazz track I used to like but had forgotten. We ate in silence. I didn't know what to say. Anything could be the spark that lit his unpredictable rage. After dinner, Adrian poured wine and handed me a glass. Do you remember when we first got married? We drank this same wine on our first night in the new house. I took the glass, my hand trembling slightly. That night, after that very wine, I had told him I wanted to keep my own art studio. He didn't say anything, but the next morning I woke up to find the studio locked. The key was no longer mine. I sat by the fireplace, wine in hand, the firelight reflecting off his glasses as he looked at me. Do you think we could start over? I took a small sip and didn't respond. In my mind was a map. I remembered Celeste's words clearly. If there's an emergency, use the agreed phrase to contact the support line. I had memorized it, hidden it in my notebook along with the card and the secret phone. When night fully fell, Adrian locked the cabin door and slid the bolt. I heard the metal click against metal. Like an invisible signal, my body tensed. He drew the curtains tight and turned off the lights. No light leaked outside. I want us to get to bed early. We'll walk around the lake tomorrow. I nodded, slid under the blanket, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Adrian lay beside me, his hand on my waist, his breathing steady. I counted each breath, like it was the only anchor keeping me alert. Around midnight, I opened my eyes. Moonlight slipped through the thin curtain, casting a dull glow across the floor. Adrian was still asleep. I carefully slid out of bed, barefoot, and stepped toward the corner of the closet where I had hidden the small bag. I turned on the phone and texted Nathan. Cabin is secure, door locked from inside. Don't call, text only. His reply came quickly. Location confirmed. Camera set up at Forest Edge. Logan is with me. I put the phone away, returned to bed, and lay in silence until morning. A light rain began tapping on the wooden roof as dawn broke. Adrian rolled over and pulled me close. Go back to sleep. No need to get up early here. I closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. I just listened to the rain, to his slow heartbeat, a sound I had heard for years, both familiar and threatening. That afternoon, while Adrian was outside chopping wood, I took the opportunity to open my suitcase and attach the recording device inside the pocket of my sweater, just as Celeste had instructed. I knew the moment would come, and I had to be ready. When he came back in, his shoulders wet, arms full of firewood, I handed him a towel, gentle, like a reflex deeply ingrained. He looked at me for a long time. You're different. I froze. How so? Too quiet, like you're hiding something. I smiled, poured him tea, handed him the warm cup. I'm just trying to enjoy this. It's been a long time since we've had peace. He nodded, but his eyes still followed me like a shadow. That night, when darkness had fully settled, he suddenly stood up and approached me. If there's anything you haven't told me, now's the time. I flinched, nearly dropping the book in my hands. What do you mean? He sat down across from me, his voice lower. Who are you talking to? Who made you look at me like that? I didn't answer. I wasn't allowed to answer. Outside, the wind had picked up. Tree branches brushed against the window like distant whispers from the forest. I looked straight into his eyes, keeping my voice as steady as I could. No one. I'm just tired. I'm not used to this much quiet. He said nothing more, just stared at me, then left the room and locked the door from the outside. I understood. If no one came, I wouldn't leave here alive. I sat down, pulled the sweater pocket, and flipped the switch on the recorder. Inside the dark cabin, surrounded by cold wooden walls, I began whispering to myself. Every detail, every word, every smallest sign. I spoke as if I were rewriting the whole story without being silenced. Because if I couldn't leave with my feet, at least I could leave behind my voice. A testimony, a narrative, a trace. And maybe, just maybe, that voice would be the only thing left if I never came back. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the narrow curtain slit, but it couldn't ease the weight pressing on my chest. I sat up carefully, trying not to wake Adrian. His arm lay across me like an invisible chain, but I had learned how to slip out without leaving a trace. I stepped into the kitchen, turned on the kettle, my breath steady to avoid triggering any signs of disturbance in the house. I checked the secret phone, which I had reinserted with a SIM card before we left. One message from Nathan. Ready. Cabin location has been sent to Logan, who would contact Celeste if anything felt off. I placed my hand on the kitchen table, the cold wood pressed against my burning palm. I knew today would be the day. I couldn't wait for nightfall. I couldn't give Adrian more time. After breakfast, Adrian told me to dress warmly. He wanted to walk around the lake. I nodded obediently, putting on the thickest coat, hiding the recorder close to my chest, secured beneath my scarf. I tucked a small folded paper into my pocket, with the cabin address and my name, just in case. We stepped outside. The air was freezing. Wind sliced through the dense forest, carrying whispers through the brittle branches. Adrian held my hand, his grip firm. Not painful, but enough to remind me. Feeling better? I nodded. The fresh air helps. I feel a little clearer. I knew you needed this. Don't worry. As long as you listen to me, we won't have any more problems. I clenched my other hand into a fist in my coat pocket. His words sounded gentle, but they were chains. We walked around the lake, then returned to the cabin. Adrian told me to go in first. He stayed outside, gathering dry branches by the path. I walked in quickly, closed the door, and rushed to the bedroom. I grabbed the phone and texted Nathan, "Cabin quiet, he's outside. Sending location." Less than 10 seconds after the message went through, I heard the door open. I managed to hide the phone under the sofa cushion and turned toward the kitchen, pretending to wash a glass. Adrian stepped inside, brushed off his shoulders, and stared straight at me. "What were you just doing?" "Cleaning up breakfast." I heard fast footsteps. I didn't turn around. I just said calmly, "Maybe I ran in too fast. It's cold." He was silent for a few seconds. I didn't dare breathe hard. Finally, he stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder, and gave a light squeeze. "Don't hide anything from me anymore, Isabella. I don't want to have to doubt you." I nodded, lowering my head to hide the shiver crawling up my spine. The afternoon passed as slowly as water dripping through stone. Adrian barely took his eyes off me. I tried to keep every movement as natural as possible, but I knew he was on edge. He could feel something had changed. I was no longer fully obedient. At dusk, I found a small piece of paper slipped through the door crack. My heart stopped. I discreetly pulled it out, stepped into the bathroom, and opened it. The handwriting was Nathan's. "Car will arrive exactly at 7 p.m. Don't panic. They're ready." I hid the note inside an empty toothpaste tube and returned to the living room. Adrian was opening wine. I sat down on the chair, my legs trembling, but I still held up my glass as if enjoying a peaceful evening. "I want us to rewatch an old movie together. You used to love Casablanca, remember?" I nodded, forcing a soft smile. "I still remember. Rick and Ilsa." "Yeah, only this time nobody's going anywhere, you understand?" I looked him straight in the eyes. The same eyes I once loved. Now they made me feel nothing but hollow. I counted every minute. At exactly 6:57 p.m., I stood up, pretending to grab more napkins. While doing so, I checked the phone and the recording device one last time. Both were still working. 7 p.m. I heard a car engine stop outside the gate. As soon as the engine cut off, Adrian turned his head, face tightening. "Did you hear that?" I shook my head. "Probably the wind." He got up and went to the window. I followed close behind, my palms soaked in sweat. And then it happened. The knock at the door. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Adrian yanked the curtain shut and strode toward the utility cabinet, pulling out a handgun I hadn't even known he kept. "Stay here." I froze, unsure whether to run or stand, unsure what would come through that door. Another knock. But this time, a voice followed. Deep. Firm. "Adrian Monroe, this is Inspector Logan Campbell. We have a warrant to search the premises related to your financial misconduct at Lakeside Hospital." Adrian turned back, his face darkened. "You called the police?" I didn't speak. I couldn't. I simply raised my hands, slowly, stepping backward, eyes locked on the gun in his hand. The door burst open before Adrian could act. Nathan stormed in first, followed by Logan and two uniformed officers. The cabin erupted into chaos. Adrian was restrained, the gun kicked away, his arms wrenched behind his back. He kept yelling, "She staged this. She's crazy. I love her." I stood still, no tears, no shaking. Nathan came to me, taking my hand. "Are you okay?" I nodded, not because I was okay, but because I had survived. At that moment, I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I had just stepped out of death's doorway. I wasn't staring at the ceiling when I looked up. I saw the sky, the forest, and myself, finally out of the cage that locked from the inside. They took Adrian away in silence, except for the clink of handcuffs and the thud of boots on the rotted wood floor. Logan handed me a business card saying someone would contact me in the coming days for a statement and legal processing. Nathan placed a hand on my shoulder as the patrol car pulled away, its lights fading down the dark dirt road. I stood motionless on the porch, arms at my sides, my body feeling weightless, but inside a storm still raged. I didn't know whether to rejoice, cry, or collapse, like all those nights I had curled into a corner of the kitchen. "You don't have to be strong right now," Nathan said. "We're leaving. No need to pack. Nothing here is worth bringing." I nodded, silent. I stepped into the cabin one last time, looking around the small space that had been my morning terror for so long. The wine glasses were still half full on the table, the napkin I had planned to use as a signal still folded in my pocket. I opened the suitcase, took out my sketchbook, Celeste's card, and the secret phone. Everything else I left behind. We left the cabin just before midnight. The rain had stopped, but the forest remained damp and cold. Logan's car slid gently over the leaf-covered road, carrying me back to a world I once believed had erased my name. I stayed at Celeste's place for the first 3 days. Her apartment was in a small town over an hour from the city, with a balcony overlooking a quiet lake and a cozy little kitchen. Each morning, she made tea, never asked anything, just placed the cup beside me and stepped outside to tend her plants. I slept a lot, dreamed often, and would sometimes wake up in a panic in the middle of the night, terrified not to find Adrian beside me. The nightmares came and went like waves crashing on an old shoreline. But this time, I didn't sink. I floated. On the 4th day, Celeste brought me to another house, one of the safe houses she managed. I would live there for a few months with 3 other women, each carrying pain without names, but sharing one thing. They had dared to leave. The house was small, with 4 rooms, a shared living space, an open kitchen, and a garden in the back, where they grew vegetables, flowers, and left behind handwritten stories on homemade paper. I didn't write anything the first week. I just read. One afternoon, as I sat by the window, flipping through a sketchbook I thought I'd lost, a woman named Mira sat beside me. She was in her 40s, had 2 children, and had been forced to leave her old life after her husband's family discovered she'd reported their son. "You know," she said quietly, "I once thought I'd die on my kitchen floor, still holding a soup spoon." I turned to her and saw no tears in her eyes, but something else. Presence. "But one day," Mira continued, "I realized if I died, he'd still live, and I'd still be the name people whispered about. So I chose to live, so I could tell my story." That sentence unlocked something in me. That night, I wrote my first line in a notebook. I am still alive. A few weeks later, I began drawing again, not landscapes, not still lifes. I drew curved lines like healing scars, silhouettes standing between shadow and light. I didn't draw faces. I didn't want to trap anyone in a mold. I just wanted to speak through pencil strokes, through the spaces between 2 outlines. One morning, Celeste brought me an offer. "Here's an art center looking for someone to guide therapy through drawing sessions for trauma survivors. You might want to try." I looked at her, my hand resting on the sketchbook. "I'm not ready to stand in front of anyone yet." "You don't need to stand, just be present. They'll see you through their own drawings." I thought about it for 2 days, then agreed. The following week, I arrived at the center and began with basic color mixing, guiding them to draw a memory they were once afraid to revisit. One woman drew a broken chair in a kitchen, another painted a red scarf hanging beside a bed. One didn't draw at all, she simply covered the entire page in black. I didn't judge, didn't advise. I simply nodded. And in one quiet moment, I realized those lines were living proof, not for a courtroom, not for a police report, but for their own minds, that they had been hurt and they had survived. I still returned to the safe house each night, to the same small room with a window facing the garden. But sleep came easier now. I still dreamed, but the dreams were no longer about rooms with no exit. They became long hallways leading to a window, open. I couldn't yet see the light beyond, but I knew it was there. But there were still many things I couldn't do. I still flinched when a tall man passed by. I still startled when someone called my name loudly. I still hadn't gathered the courage to open my old phone and delete all the wedding photos. But I knew that as long as I kept breathing, kept holding a pencil, kept listening to another woman tell her story, that was one more day I reclaimed a piece of myself. I don't think I'll ever forget Adrian, but I don't need to forget him. I just need to keep walking without carrying him with me. And even if the wound leaves a scar, I'll make it a part of my life's map. A place where I once got lost and where I chose to turn back. I returned to the therapy center on a rainy afternoon in March. The first spring rains in this town always carried the smell of wet earth and the soft sound of droplets slipping through old roof tiles, falling gently into the heart. That day, I asked the group to draw a doorway, any doorway they remembered. An older woman sketched the kitchen door that opened onto her childhood garden. A younger woman drew only a long black line with darkness behind it. No one explained. I didn't ask. I simply moved gently from one to the next, letting silence be the encouragement they needed. When the session ended, a woman named Clara approached me. She'd attended 3 classes, never spoken, only drawn twisted shapes in hues of ash gray and bruised red. "Have you ever been so afraid you couldn't breathe?" she asked, her voice hoarse as if it carried sleepless nights. I didn't answer right away, I simply nodded, gently. Back then, I kept thinking I was making it all up, that I was weak, that fear was my fault. I looked at her, held her hand for a second, then let go, softly as a passing touch. "No one imagines the pain that sits beneath your ribs, Clara. No one imagines the eyes of someone who once promised to protect you becoming the ghost in every dream." She went quiet, and then, for the first time since joining the class, she cried. I walked her to the hallway, handed her tissues, saying nothing. Sometimes we don't need someone to lead us. We just need someone to stand nearby when we stop, breathe, and realize we're still alive. A few days later, I was invited to speak at a small nonprofit conference titled Rebuilding from Ruin. At first, I declined. I didn't think I was strong enough to speak about the past, as if it didn't still follow me into the night. But Celeste looked at me calmly. "Isabella, you don't have to tell everything. Your presence is the story." I sat in front of a mirror for hours, practicing a few opening lines. Each time I opened my mouth, my throat tightened. No sound came out. I feared the audience's eyes, feared being the center of attention, not for Adrian's crimes, but for having survived. Then, the night before the conference, I opened the old phone I had once planned to erase. In an unnamed folder, I found the recording I'd made at the cabin. Adrian's voice, sharp and threatening, sounds of impact, something breaking. I didn't listen to the whole thing. I just let the first few seconds play, then stopped. Not out of fear, but because I remembered. Too well. Decided not to delete it. I saved it to a hard drive and stored it deep in a drawer as a copy of the road I'd walked. And I knew I would go to the conference, not to retell the nightmare, but to show someone, maybe someone like Clara, that a new dream can grow from shattered ground. That morning, I wore a long ash gray dress and pinned an old brooch of my mother's to my chest, a wild daisy, a flower that grows by the roadside, fragile but never breaks in the storm. As I stepped onto the small stage, the spotlight casting a soft glow on my face, I didn't feel alone. I felt the presence of dozens of women standing behind me. Not visible, but there. Women I had taught, hugged, touched. Women like me. I took a deep breath and spoke in the calmest voice I could find. I once lived in a big house where no one dared to scream, where walls were decorated with my art, but my voice was hidden. I used to believe that if someone found out, I'd be blamed, shamed, left alone, but then I realized the only thing making me disappear was my own silence. I don't remember everything I said, I just remember the feeling as I stepped off the stage, didn't tremble or regret. Later, I received word that Adrian had been charged with 2 additional counts of financial crime with a new sentence pending. I didn't feel joy or revenge. I just sat by the window watching spring rain fall gently on the neighbor's roof, thinking about all the nights I'd wondered whether justice existed for someone like me. And I realized justice isn't the verdict. It's sleeping without nightmares. It's saying my name out loud without fear. It's waking up without checking the door lock, without flinching at the eyes beside me in bed. Justice, to me, is the freedom I reclaimed, piece by piece, day by day. And no one can take it back. One early summer morning, as I was rearranging the bookshelf at the therapy center, Celeste walked in holding a folded map and a light brown folder. She placed them on the table, pulled up a chair across from me, her gaze distant as if weighing something important. Isabella, have you ever thought about working long-term with the network again, not just here, but on a bigger scale? I looked up, hands freezing mid-shelf. I'd never imagined myself stepping outside this safe space. To me, the little house, the warm kitchen, the art room, the therapy classes, they had become the only world I dared to trust. You mean, we're opening 3 new safe houses in the northern part of the state. That region has no support system for abused women. I need a regional coordinator, someone who understands both fear and recovery. You have both. I stayed silent for a long time. I wasn't afraid of responsibility. I was afraid to leave this place, to face too many people, to manage situations that echoed my own past. I wasn't sure I was steady enough to hold someone else's pain. Celeste didn't push. She simply stood, placed a hand gently on my shoulder, and left, leaving the map and folder behind. I sat there a long time, studying the lines on the map. Small towns, remote areas where silence was thicker than the violence itself, where women had no one to call, nowhere to go. That evening, I brought the story to the balcony where the women in the house gathered to drink tea. When I mentioned the new safe houses, the group fell quiet. Then Mira, the woman who had once sat next to me on my first day, smiled softly. "You're afraid," she said, "because you know the pain too well. But that's exactly why you should go. No one can lead better than someone who's already found the way out." I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, tracing the pencil marks in an old sketchbook where I had written my earliest memories after escaping Adrian. The shaky lines, the fragmented drawings. Looking back now, they stood as proof of how far I had come. The next morning, I returned to the center and found Celeste checking supplies in the storage room. "You think I'm strong enough?" She turned, her eyes steady as always. "No one feels strong at the beginning, but you won't go alone, and you know the most important thing, how to listen without judgment." I nodded. Not quite agreement, but a sign, a shift. 3 weeks later, I moved to the town of Riverton, where one of the 3 new safe houses was nearing completion. The house was old, with gray brick walls, but the foundation was solid and the backyard caught beautiful light. I cleaned the first bedroom, hung pale green curtains I'd sewn from an old tablecloth, placed small flower pots along the windowsill, and tied a bamboo wind chime to the porch. On opening day, only one woman knocked on the door. Her name was Dana. She brought 2 small children and nothing else but a cloth bag with a few worn clothes and a children's book with a torn spine. She didn't cry. didn't ask anything. She simply sat in the living room, clutching her kids like she might disappear if she let go. I sat beside her without speaking. I poured some tea, placed the cup next to her, and quietly walked away. That night, she knocked on my door and asked just one question. Is it really true no one can find me here? I looked into her eyes and answered slowly. No one. Here, you don't have to hide. You're starting over. Day by day, more women arrived. Some came with children, others brought prescriptions and unspoken fears. Some brought nothing but bruises that hadn't yet faded. I didn't ask about their pasts. I gave them a key, a clean bed, and one sentence. You can stay as long as you need. This space is yours. I held small cooking classes where each woman made a dish they loved from childhood. We named every dish and stuck colorful paper labels with their names on the fridge. I set up a modest art corner, just a few brushes, watercolor, and craft paper. No one was required to draw, but within 2 weeks, colors began to appear on the walls. Paintings quietly telling stories no one dared to put into words. I no longer saw myself as a survivor, I saw myself as a guide. Someone standing in a forest that was once a maze, now holding up a light for others to pass through. One late evening, as I was finishing a report to send back to the center, Nathan called. He said he was outside and had a small gift. I rushed to open the door. He stood there holding a cardboard box. Inside was a small wooden plaque, carved with the words, "A home for those brave enough to live." I stared at the words for a long time, then looked at Nathan. I never thought I'd have a home. He placed a hand on my shoulder, soft as an unspoken promise. But you've built one for so many, and you're living in it too. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Not everyone is willing to follow a story this long, filled with such quiet pain. But if you're still here, maybe you too carry some hurt inside. Maybe it's yours, or maybe it belongs to someone you love. I didn't tell this story to be pitied. I told it because I know I'm not the only one who's walked through darkness. I told it so those who are still silent know you are not alone. There are doors opening, there are hands ready to catch you when you're falling. So what about you? If you were me in this story, what would you do? Would you walk away? Would you choose silence or choose to speak? I want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below about how you feel, what scares you, or simply that you're still here. Because sometimes just one word is enough to warm a heart that's gone cold. And if you want to walk this journey with me, a journey of truth, healing, and the real stories hidden inside families, hit follow on this channel. Because there are many more stories waiting to be told, waiting to be heard, and maybe someday one of them could be yours. Or save someone you love.